Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from JessCrafts.com. Today I have a special video as a guest designer for StencilGirl products. They make a variety of art stencils and I was really happy to be invited as a guest designer. Particularly my style is probably a little bit different than what you would normally see on the blog, but I think that is what is so fantastic about stencils, and particularly these art stencils, is that you can really make them fit with any style. So they're not necessarily stencils meant to look for like a specific thing, but a lot of just fun artsy stencils. And then they have a lot of great stencils that do look like specific things, like human face stencils or animal stencils for art journaling. For today's card, I am working with the Cascading Feathers 6x6 stencil. I tend to use the smaller stencils because I primarily make cards. And I am starting by putting a little of distress stain down on watercolor paper to create an ombre background. I want to turn the cascading feathers into flames. That's what kind of stood out to me when I saw the stencil. And again, that's the nice thing about stencils, that versatility, where you can make it look like a variety of things. I can use this for flames this time, and then in an art journal page, turn it into the feathers on a bird. And I created this background with the distress stain because I wanted something that was a little bit more translucent. However, I will be using distress ink through the stencil to create something a little bit more dark. I think that what's fun about these mixed media inspired sort of techniques is being able to play with the properties and elements of each, being able to layer something more opaque on something translucent to get a particular effect. So I am going to use these distress inks right through the stencil, and I have the ink blending tools. There is some fine detail in these stencils, and so my suggestion is to do a little bit more of a dabbing motion rather than a sweeping motion. Sometimes when you blend on distress inks, you kind of go in that circular pattern, but that's going to catch some of the edges of these stencils. And so I'm doing more of a dab and push method, where I'm just sort of pushing up the color a little bit. And I'm thinking about the particular stencil that I'm using, because most of the points are faced upwards, so the way that I'm holding it right now, I can pull upwards. If I tried to pull downwards, I'm going to be more likely to catch. So just kind of consider when you're working with your stencils that if you're not adhering them down, like with some spray adhesive, you need to keep in mind that they will come up. And so you have to think about how you're applying your methods. I had sillily thought that I could use some distress stain right through the stencil, but of course distress stain being liquid seeped right into the edges, and so you would have to do some different treatment. You couldn't just apply distress stain right on top of the stencil. So as you can see, by using two different colors of the distress ink and the distress stains underneath, I was able to get a lot of depth in this sort of fiery background here. Now, just for a little bit more added interest, what I'm going to do is take some distress stain diluted with water. You could also just use distress ink diluted with water, or any sort of more translucent ink, and you just going to flick it on with a paintbrush. Another reason that I use two different kinds of distress product is that I wanted to create a layered effect as opposed to a blended effect. So you kind of keep that in mind. That's why a lot of times when you're doing mixed media, you'll want to make sure a layer might be dry before you add another, or you think about using a more opaque medium on top. So once I have this layered on, I'm trying to see, do I feel like I have enough depth? I'm adding a little bit more orange with some flicks as well. And then I'm going to move on to the focal image element. My primary way of using stencils is to create beautiful backgrounds for card making, and adding a lot of that interest and depth back there. However, I do want to pair this up with some cutesy stamps to bring in my personal style. And so I have these stamps from Newton's Nook Designs, and I've stamped this little couple and then the sentiment, "Hey there, hottie," to go with that flame background. And I'm going to be coloring these with Prisma colored pencils. So I'll zoom in a little bit and talk briefly about what I do with the Prisma colored pencils. I am by no means an expert in them. I've only recently got some Prisma pencils, but I do find them pretty enjoyable to color with. I was sort of playing around with my stencils as well, and how you could use stencils in a more traditional way of actually tracing the stencils with the colored pencils. So kind of like you did back in grade school with stencils, is you actually trace the shapes with, a pencil or marker. And it works great with something like Inktense pencils as well. But as I'm coloring the critter here, what I like to do is do an overall coat of the lightest color, because I find with Prismas adding color helps to get more blending. The more you have laid down on the paper, the more effective it is. And so once I have my light color down, I start adding my medium tone and then my darkest tone. And finally, I will blend it all out with the lightest color of colored pencil. I personally find that to be the easiest thing to do rather than using Gamsol or something like that. Like many people, I kind of like to get my crafting done quickly, and I don't like to fuss around a lot with every little technique, and that's why I kind of accept that things don't have to be perfect. But if there is a faster way to get something done that looks almost as good, that's probably what I'm going to go for. And so blending it out with that lighter color tends to work really well in my opinion. Once I have colored all of the cats in, I will think about how to incorporate them more into the scene. And so you see that I chose a red collar and an orange collar for each cat, so that way that it will pull in the colors and really make them a more cohesive card overall. And just for a little added detail, I retrace their eyes, as that tends to get dulled a little bit when using colored pencils. So I would love for you to join me over at my blog, but also at the StencilGirlTalk.com, where you could check out more still pictures of the project. And I will be sure to feature some of the other StencilGirl stencils in some videos in the future, so that you can see other ways you can subscribe to my channel for more crafting videos. And thanks for watching. Bye!